everybody, and welcome to Economics with the Honorable David M. Walker. I'm Nick Palavito. I'll be your moderator for today's show, and we want to thank our viewers from around the world coming in today. And we also do have a special guest plus our regular panel. First of all, we're going to bring our regular panel in, then we'll invite the special guest. We're going to bring in Rick Rosner, who's a member of the Mega Society. People don't know what that is. It's the top 1 out of a million on IQ tests. And he was also a writer for Jimmy Kimmel Live from Los Angeles. We bring in Rick Rosner. Rick, welcome to Economics with the Honorable David M. Walker. Substituting for David M. Walker, because he's traveling and internationally, will be the author of one of my favorite books, The Millionaire Next Door, and this book, Richer Than a Millionaire. Now, I bought his book back in 1984 and also bought a lot of his books. They're sitting back there. He wrote a book with Tom Stanley called The Millionaire Next Door, and now has a new book, Richer Than a Millionaire. Can't beat this guy, the Honorable Bill Danko. Bill, thank you for substituting in our great friend, who's going to be traveling abroad. And also from the very famous show here on the Pod TV network, Modern Investing. We're going into Canada and bring in Sasha Starr. Do Swadanya, Sasha Starr. Good to see you here. And then our newbie on the panel, he's actually a graduate of the University of South Florida, at least this is what I got from his LinkedIn page, where he received his MBA, a certified financial planner. Here to help us is James Coford. James, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
So since everybody knows everybody here, and Shaquille will be joining us later on from Australia, you're the newbie. It's like going to a poker tournament. If you don't know who the mark is, you are. Okay.
I figured.
So the thing is, tell the panel a little about yourself, who you are, where you're from, what you do. Give us.
Well, I feel a little bit like Ross Perot here. Who am I and what am I doing here? My name, I go by Jim. I'm in Tampa, Florida. I work at a small RIA. I've been a certified financial planner for, going on 7-8 years now, and excited to be here.
Okay, that sounds good. And the thing is, the topic we're going to be looking at today is something that shows up on the internet. We had 1,500 people do the respond to the poll with about, 45 people voted, 50 people or so voted on this. And it deals with a interesting economic phenomenon that we're going to discuss. And that is the problem with the skewing of the wealth to the top people in the United States, where 10% of the population own 70% of the assets in the United States, approximately. The question is that a problem? Do we see a problem here with that? 10% and you should probably see this in your practice also, James. 10% of the population owns 70% of all the assets. So when you're working with somebody from a financial standpoint, 100 people are in the room, 10 people you want to talk to, and we'll talk about the bottom 70% later. Do you see that distribution? I'm going to start with Rick Rosner. He's next door to us. Rick, do you see a problem with that distribution scheme where 10% of the population owns 70% in LA? You probably see this all the time. What are your thoughts on that? We can't hear you. Rick, we can't hear you.
All right, sorry, it's even worse than that, because people over 45 own 94% of all the individually owned wealth in America. Boomers own everything. And, it used to be that each generation could expect to do better than the generation before. It hasn't been that way for the past generation and a half. And it got worse under COVID. Everybody knows that the FANG companies made bank under COVID, and other people did not.
Okay, well, I'm going to add another little demographic to this, Rick, and what are your thoughts on this? 70% of the population in the United States cannot get a hold of $1,000. in the event of emergency. So now this goes back to if you're a financial advisor, 100 people are in the room, 70 of them, 70 can't even get $1,000. How can you give them?
There's been a huge shift since World War II. After World War II, everybody, the dad having a job was enough for the mom to stay home, to buy a starter home, to send the kids to school. He had the GI Bill too. Now we've got the highest employment in 60 years, but it's all these, people have multiple jobs just to make ends meet. The increased productivity over the past 80 years hasn't filtered down in terms of wages for a lot of people. It's, the U.S. is still strong economically, but individual Americans, a lot of them feel precarious.
All right, now we'll go to the Millionaire Next Door, which I found his book very fascinating. I read it back in 1984, still fascinating today, about how people actually become a millionaire and their behavior. Bill Denko, what are your thoughts about this? Demographic number one, 10% of the population owns 70% of the assets, and apparently it's even skewed toward older people. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I believe that to be true. Look, here's the problem. We live in a consumer society, and we have this advertising mantra and this theme in our culture that more is better. More, a new phone every 2 years, a new car every 2 years. We have people who think that bigger, faster, better is just what they must do to be part of our society. And I think it's all bogus. When I look back, my mother was born in 1913 and she lived through the Depression. And of course, before she died in 1998, we've had these conversations about, Mom, what was it like living through the Depression? Did you know you were poor? And she said, no, because we always had a cow. We always had eggs. We always had something to eat. We canned our own food. We took care of our own family. It wasn't a problem, but we've created this problem of mass consumption, and we've gotten ourselves into more and more debt. We have school tuitions that are out of control. We have healthcare costs that are out of control, largely because of, liability insurance that these hospitals have to pay. And my point is this: we've brought this on ourselves, but there are some enlightened people in our society, the millionaires next door, if you will, who understand that there are some things that just don't go out of style. You work, you live on 80% of what you make, you save 20% consistently, you invest across a diverse set of assets, you let time work for you, and you get rid of this notion of you need something new all the time. So there is a solution, getting back to the basics of what has to be done to build wealth and get rid of this notion of being a hyper-consumption society. Okay.
Yeah. Okay, we'll go to Canada. Sasha Starr, who's the star of the show Modern Investing. What is the view from Canada when we see that in the United States we have 10% of the population has 70% of the assets, and 70% of the population can't get a hold of $1,000? So what are your thoughts in Canada about how we're skewed here in the United States toward very few people?
Actually, if you will take, instead of US dollar, Canadian dollars, it will be much bigger figures than $1,000. It will be more likely $1,215 Canadians. So you will feel a little bit richer than just $1,000. That's a good thing. The bad thing is that while you're talking about the internal problems of US, the external problems are far bigger. US doesn't have any formulated foreign policy. It just goes day by day. Biden gets up in the morning if he feels better, so he'll say a thing or two. If he doesn't feel so well, then he's not going to say anything at all day. And then in the evening, he will have a glass of hot milk and will go to sleep.
Okay, now we're going to go down under to Australia and see what your thoughts are, Shaquille Latmer, about this demographic we have in the United States. I don't know if they have the same issues in Australia, but what are your thoughts on that? We have 10% of the population owns 70%, so you better work with these people. But 70% of our room, they don't even have $1,000. What are your thoughts down under, Nate?
Well, firstly, we haven't established that I'm back in Australia yet, and just to keep the tax office away from me. But no. Secondly, look, the United States, we love you guys. I love you guys. I love the freedoms and what your country tells us that you stand for with your freedoms and small government. But we also love the Comedy Act, which is your political system. We've got the Democrats that are, trying to trans the kids and are doing all these horrible things and are, making it harder to build properties in California. And we have the Republicans that are full of stability and can't work out a speaker for 3 weeks. And for the first time in US history have got rid of their speaker. Fantastic. Yes, the world is absolutely in awe of the bullshit that comes out of your political system. Meanwhile, you guys have this bizarre idea that you're really unique, that apparently inflation only hits Americans, or the unemployment issues and cost of living crisis has only hit you guys, as if the rest of us who live in Western countries aren't experiencing the same thing, even though we've just had elections in Australia and New Zealand, etc., dealing with those same issues. The UK's just had the same issues. Canada's got the same issues. So I'm not sure why America thinks it's unique on this. But unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, when the Australian government makes a really bad decision, or the New Zealand government makes a really bad decision, it doesn't affect everybody else in the world. But when the United States makes a really bad decision, it does affect everybody else in the world. The counter to that is that when the United States makes a really good decision, it also affects everybody else in the world in a positive way, in the Western world anyway, in a positive way. I think we just need to get back to basics. And I think, as I said on the Australian show that Kimberly Calhoun came on, so we give a quick plug to Edge Radio in Australia, who is linked up with Pod TV at the moment. Look, one of the issues that we have is that we have people who are reasonable people. They're not hateful people. They don't hate everybody else, but who benefit in different ways from government policy. So, for example, we have a cost of living crisis, some of which is caused by the extremely high price of housing. What do you want government to do? If government releases more land and makes it easier for people to build homes, which reduces the pressure on the housing market, that may be good for one set of society, especially young people, people who are struggling to get into the property market. It helps them. But conversely, people who have invested in properties, people who perhaps already own a property, are either going to experience a decrease in the property price, or they're not going to experience the same sort of increase in their investment that they otherwise would have had if the government regulations continued to make property investing and property prices easier. So what do? I don't think that either of these parties hate each other, but they just have different vested interests. And I think that's something that we're going to have to address. We're going to address it economically. We're going to have to address it financially. And I'll just say to Bill, and I hope you don't feel over the last few shows that I'm in any way attacking you, Bill, because I'm not. I've got both your books, and I love what you're saying. I think it's really good advice, actually. I do think it's good advice. And when I don't agree with it, it's not because I don't agree with what you're saying. I do. But I just have a bit of an issue, I think, with the older generation telling those of us that are younger, well, maybe you shouldn't live so close to the city. Maybe you shouldn't expect to have that, nice 4-bedroom, 2-bathroom house close to the city. Maybe you shouldn't buy a car so often. Maybe you shouldn't go to that college and get that degree. And then our grandparents are looking at us and going, well, when I was your age, I was married and I had 14 children and I had, 6 houses. And I worked as a waiter at the local cafe, and that's how I put myself through college. Yeah, because your college tuition was $30 a term, and for us it's $30,000 a term. I just feel like asking young people to cut back is another way of saying to young people, we've had this great life, we've created this awesome world, but you, young person, you're not going to be able to have that sort of life. So you better cut back. Mm-hmm. And all your friends, if you do what you're suggesting, which absolutely makes sense, spend 80% of your income. That absolutely makes sense, and it's a road eventually to wealth. But what it means, though, is in your 20s and 30s, you're going to see your friends who have hocked themselves to the brink. They've got credit card debt. They've got huge loans, but they've got the nice house. They've got the nice car, and you don't. And you're sitting there driving some old car, and you're buying cheap clothes, and you're trying to make it the world, and you look poor, and you can't keep up with your peer group. That's a difficult thing to do. So I think there's a lot of young people that feel left behind. That's why they borrow so much money, and that's why if you try to address the issue of people not having $1,000 in America or $1,500 in Canada or Australia, yeah, they don't. But even if you were to give it to them, they're going to spend it because they're trying to keep up with the Joneses, and they're trying to have a lifestyle that they feel like they should be able to have because their parents and grandparents had that in their eyes. So I think it's a tough gig.
We're going to go to our certified financial planner. I gave him a shot to see how things work. James Coford, you're up to bat. What are your thoughts about this? We put this on LinkedIn, our Pod TV LinkedIn poll. 10% of the population own 70% of the assets, but 70%
I have no
of our
problem with that at all.
$1,000. I know you don't have a problem with that. Neither do I. Go on, James, financial planner, help us.
So I like to keep things somewhat in perspective. And I mean, obviously, we don't have statistics going back this far, but I would imagine for the vast majority of the history of mankind that the 10%, 70% dynamic was skewed much more highly towards an even smaller group of people owning even more. So medieval times, back before that, Stone Age, whatever. Ancient Greek, Iron Age, Stone Age, Bronze Age, you probably had, 99% of the assets in the world were held by 0.01% of the population. So keeping that in perspective, yeah, it is skewed. I think the bigger problem is that the $1,000 figure that, most people can't pull together $1,000 to face an emergency. I have two boys that are in their early 20s, and I could sit there and say, well, when I was your age, I made $7 an hour, and I was able to afford everything because I had roommates and we all lived together and pitched in, and it was tight, but I could still do it. But I take a look at their budget. I see what they bring in. I look at their rents. I look at their bills. And I can't imagine the pressure that they're under, and things are only getting more expensive daily as we speak. I go to the grocery store and I put together, a bag of groceries. It seems like 4 + 7 + 8 = $84. the pocketbooks are getting tighter. I don't know what the solution. Wages aren't keeping up with inflation. So of course it's going to be difficult to get together, $1,000 for an emergency. But what's the path forward? I think financial education for younger generations, for younger people is essential. Teaching them the basic tools of personal finance versus pushing credit cards down their throats and Kardashians in their eyeballs every day. I think that finding a values-based community, whether that be just a group of people that share common interests, or church, or whatever, that value the sorts of things like Bill was talking about saving more than spending less than you make, saving 20%, getting together, paying off debts, snowball fashion. Ramsey gets a lot of flack in advisor world, but I think the guy's a national treasure. I listen to him all the time. He has great sound advice that is directly applicable for that 90% of the population that don't owe the 70% of assets. So that would be.
James, can I ask you something with respect? And I certainly do have respect. You're a CFP and MBA, but CFP certainly have a lot of respect given my background. But let me just ask this: why should we not then just have government control and force people to save $1,000, or give people $1,000 like we did in COVID and force them not to spend it, so they've always got $1,000? I mean, we would never suggest that, right? So
yeah, I don't think wealth redistribution is any sort of solution. I mean, that's a disaster.
I feel like we're setting a goalpost that I don't think young people can realistically meet. But additionally to that, if you're a young person going through high school today and you actually had the ability to have a school system that taught you what Nick and Bill and others on this panel would like young people to learn, which is financial responsibility, budgeting, spending within your means, not borrowing money that you can't afford to pay back for things that are not going to add to your wealth. There's nothing wrong with having debt if you've got debt for something that's going to add to your wealth, but having debt for something that's not going to add to your wealth is a bad idea. Who are they supposed to exactly take this advice from? Should they look at Washington, D.C. and see how they manage the finances of America? Should they look at Canberra in Australia and see how the politicians run the finances of Australia, or the UK or Canada for Sasha? Should they look at how government spends it? We have our supposed leaders, the people that supposedly represent us, making a pig's breakfast out of, the finances of our countries. And then we expect our young people to, be very fiscally conservative and look after themselves and their future and all of those sorts of things. It's just not realistic. And I think when they see the excesses of not just politicians, but their families, the excesses of people that are rent seekers within our communities, of course they want some of that. And as far as what you can see in the media and everywhere else, the way to get rich is to borrow it, spend it, and if you don't have enough, hell, declare bankruptcy. It's not to try to
Prime Minister,
responsible, because that's just not. You tell me how many people other than Warren Buffett, how many people do you know who are extremely wealthy and in the public eye who have become wealthy because of fiscal responsibility and managing their finances very well? We don't champion that. We champion the Kardashians. We champion all these people that spend, and then declare bankruptcy. So what do you expect young people to do?
Read the book, The Millionaire Next Door. But Rick Rosner, you had a comment.
Science fiction eventually comes home to roost. And we've been looking at extreme technological changes for the past century. And the situation now is, and the types of jobs we have, the types of industries we have are way different than they were 80 years ago. And the model we're tending towards is, and this movie comes up a lot on this show, is idiocracy. And some nations are experimenting with guarantee. If automation, it keeps changing the employment landscape, then we're going to be looking at some kind of redistribution of wealth via guaranteed basic income, which is a euphemism for just throwing money at people, which some Baltic countries are experimenting with. And we need, that's thing one. Thing two is we got to get money out of politics, because our tax structure right now is owned by billionaires. For every $1 million that a billionaire contributes to political candidates, they get $5 million back in tax cuts. Citizens United became law, I don't know, how many years ago? 10 years ago? 12?
10 years ago, about 10 or 12 years ago.
And it's made things way worse. Not that taxing the heck out of billionaires would save the country, but, anyway.
Yeah.
What? It'd be a good thing, Rick, would it?
Oh,
It'd be a good thing.
hold a second. It was
Tax-
my turn.
If we tax the wealthy more, if we tax that 1 second, if we tax the wealthy more, would that be a good thing? It's not that growth in the United States. We'll just talk about the United States because most of you are American. It's not that low taxes have led to growth in the US, right? Apparently, high taxes and punishing those who have become wealthy, that has helped the US, has it, at any time in its history?
Well, before anybody answers, I had a quick question for James and Bill, and that was where I was going to go and everything. So, James, just really quickly, because one of the conversations I've heard people talking about, actually, that's been put out there in South Carolina. I think it was out in North Carolina as well. But as a financial planner, do you think that we're talking enough about generational wealth? Because I also think that a lot of people don't realize what they've got in their hands, and then the corporations, and that's what's happening in South Carolina. And apparently Tyler Perry is coming to the rescue of this particular woman that is being driven out by development and everything. And it was also a case in the coastal area of North Carolina as well. And there was a whole movie around it called Silver Dollar Road and everything. But do you think that enough of our kids even know what they have in their hands in terms of generational wealth being passed from generation to generation? Because I know I'm fortunate. I've got some land in Halifax County, North Carolina, that will be passed down to me because that's the way it's arranged for me and my brothers and cousins and all along those lines. But I sometimes think that people don't realize what they have and don't know what to do with what they have when they got it. But I'd love to hear your thoughts around generational wealth.
Bill, I'll let you jump at that one first.
Yeah. No, I'm a proponent of generational wealth, that's for sure. But one of the best things you can do to ensure wealth in the next generation is make sure they're well educated with the right kind of education. I always go back to the Warren Buffett admonition: give your children enough so that they can do anything, but not so much they can do nothing. If you can somehow stimulate your children to get the right kind of occupation, be it with their hands or with their mind, well, you have to have your mind too to be a carpenter. I get that. But, the blue collar versus the white collar type occupation, there's no such thing as a bad occupation if you're the very best at what you do. And if your next generation has a talent to add value, that's the thing, not some sort of sinecure that they're going to, get some sort of, payment for doing nothing. But if they can actually add value to the system, to the company that they're working for, then the money comes as the reward. But that's how you build the wealth, by giving the skill set. It's that old saying as well, give your children enough knowledge they know how to fish instead of just giving them a fish, because it's so easy, when you have the easy come, easy go attitude of letting the house that they inherit run into be dilapidated after a few years because they can't afford it. Look, here's an example. One of my former students at the university, she's a CPA, but now she sells houses for a high-end real estate company in a very affluent community in New York. And she says, you'd be surprised on some of the people that I come in contact with, where a parent says to the child, I will give you up to $5 million to buy a house, but you're going to have to pay the taxes and the upkeep. And so when she takes this individual to look at these $5 million houses, of which there's a number of them in this community, and they realize they have these $100,000 tax bills and utility bills and maintenance and everything else, they back away, saying they can't handle the wealth of having the gift of a $5 million house. So you got to be careful. You have to have the next generation being able to sustain what they have. You just can't give them this and give the golden handcuffs to them saying, okay, now support it on your own. They're going to fall.
So Bill, let me just say, because obviously, again, I respect you deeply, and as well as David and Walker, but we had this conversation when it came to inheritance tax, and I'm just so surprised, and I so love conservatives trying to tell me that if I'm blessed enough to have children, if God blesses me with children, that somehow the government, if I was to be American, I'm not, so we don't have inheritance tax here, but if I was to become American, the American government would be somehow doing me a favor and doing my children a favor by making sure that my children don't go down some wayward path in life by the government taking half of everything that I've got that I want to give to my children, right? And making sure that they don't go down this wayward path. Now,
look, let Jim respond to that. It's what about generation, skipping taxes? What are some of the? I mean,
so what? So I'll just say to James. I'll let you respond to this, James. Everybody that I know, other than tax professionals, not just in Australia, but in the UK, Canada, the US, the Five Eyes countries, which I predominantly travel in, Switzerland, everywhere else, I don't know of anybody who does their taxes correctly. I don't know of anybody other than tax professionals who I can look at their tax return and go, you didn't miss something. There's not something you've left on the table, right? The tax code is so complicated. And the US, you got 1,500-page tax code and 70,000 pages of explanatory documents in relation to your tax code. It's absurd. And anybody who's in the US, it's a liability. If you run it like a business, it's a liability like any other liability that you would have as a business. You would absolutely, if you had any sense, try to minimize that liability or try to reduce that liability like you would any other expense. But for some bizarre reason, people seem to be saying that if you are one of those celebrities that earns $30 million a film, hey, you want to do $10,000 a week worth of cocaine and, drink yourself into oblivion and fly on private jets? No problems. But if you, on the other hand, want to live a reasonably nice life, be responsible with your money, and instead of having spent all that money on drugs and a good time, leave that money to your children. Oh, no, you can't do that. We as the government are going to step in. We're going to take half of it. By the way, we're not taking half of it to be confiscatory. We're taking half of it because we're trying to do the right thing by you and your children. Because we don't want your children, to have this bad life because they can't handle the money. No, this is not fair.
Rick's got a point.
All right, so
Rick's got a point.
All right, in terms of the inheritance tax, the first $13 million of your fortune that you're passing on is exempted from inheritance tax. So that's
does that make it better? Does it? Does that make it better? What if it was the first 500 million? It doesn't make a difference. You are trying to take money.
Let him finish his
from
point.
somebody who's already earned it.
So, all right, but that's thing one. Thing two is the IRS. Taxes are incredibly complicated in the U.S., but right now the IRS is toothless. So if you get a CPA to put together a good argument, if you, Mr. Rich person, to set you up right, you can pay we know that you can pay 3% of your income, and the IRS isn't going to come after you. That's on the tax side. I took a look at how our family ended up with generational wealth. After generation after generation, we didn't have very many kids. So that's thing one is just don't keep your money, pass it on to one or two kids instead of 8 like people used to do. Thing two is my family used to be involved in retail, all these small business people. but I wouldn't go into retail now. Retail is hell now. So, you know,
let me ask you a question, Rick.
Hi, I'm Nathan Osmond, singer, songwriter, motivational speaker, and even mortgage loan officer. I've known Dr. Bill Danko for over 20 years, and we've shared the stage at many great financial conferences the world over. Just recently, Dr. Bill Danko did a great Zoom call for my sales associates and shared some great principles from his New York Times longest best-selling list, The Millionaire Next Door, but also what it means to be richer than a millionaire. This is his new book, and I highly recommend it. The entire team at the Elite Team was very appreciative of Dr. Bill Danko's time and his insights, as he's a speaker that speaks with conviction from the heart. In fact, we ordered over 100 different copies of this book to give to our clients and our associates because we truly believe that by studying this book, it can really help you to get through these turbulent times. This book is solid with research and survey research and empirical evidence that helps you to understand that yes, money is important, but money plus happiness is even better. I highly recommend that you go get a copy of this book today. You won't regret it.
And we're back.
Thank
See,
you.
that was a great commercial, wasn't it?
Can I just respond to Rick for a second?
I don't see how we can stop you, Shaquille. So
Yeah,
Well,
Shaq, you dominated the conversation. Can you let Mark go next? He had his hand up.
Let me just ask you a question, Rick. When you talk about generational wealth in the United States, I notice that people try to gloss over generational poverty in the United States because by and large, and when you look at the statistics, you don't have for the last 100 years a person who is poor who is still poor today. Now, there's a notable exception for the people that are in the census. Let's leave that aside for a moment. For the everyday person living in the United States, for immigrants that have moved to the United States, you don't have poor families from 100 years ago that are still poor today. You do have rich families from America who are poorer today, relatively speaking, than what they were, who are still wealthy, but are poorer than what they were. This is the thing. Western countries, and especially the United States, likes to beat itself up as if somehow the system of capitalism and freedom and liberty has somehow created a bad result. But it's just not the case. And my family,
Hold on a second. Shaquille,
that moved to the United States have become relatively wealthy. My family that moved to the UK, to Australia, and everywhere else have become relatively wealthy. Why are people so negative on the West? I just don't. I don't understand.
Hold on a second. I've got a quick question for Bill and everything. I got a quick question for Bill, but I also have to comment on what you just said and everything because that was I'm just going to be blatant and everything. That was a bunch of horseshit and a bunch of baloney and everything because there's definitely generational poverty that exists. There are definitely people that have gone from generation to generation to generation. I mean, that's the whole concept around where
Such as
people
whom? Such as whom, Mark? If you're gonna call me out, such as whom? What families?
Shaq, you literally started your comment with, there is generational poverty for this group, but we're going to ignore that group. And I'm going to talk about
No.
That was your
Don't.
Please,
try to
Shaq, you dominated
mischaracterize
the
what I've
conversation. I would love to hear what Mark had to say.
Because I was going to say that I know that there have been people that, and Bill, hold on a second.
Shaq, give other people the
Hold on a second.
opportunity to talk.
Yeah, and what I was going to say, and I'd love to hear Bill's thoughts around this, is I do know that there are folks that have had poverty from one society to another. There have definitely been even some government programs that have enhanced what is going on with generational poverty. So this is what I believe and everything along those lines, because definitely I can tell you some people that have lived in the projects and they are now in their next generation is in the projects and their generation after that in the projects. So to say that there is not generational poverty, I think is a misstatement and all along those lines. Hold on a second, Shaquille. Hold on a second, Shaquille. I was going to ask Shaquille a specific question. Hold on, and you took it come back to
getting these
your comments in a minute. Hey,
Shaq.
Shaquille, you've dominated. So
I'm sick
hold
and tired
on.
of getting
Hold on.
these
I'm not
emails
trying to
Shaq.
and everything. So
Fan
hold
base.
on a second.
Dominated the
Hold
whole
on.
conversation.
Hold on. I got a question for Bill, which is where I was going to go to the original statement
No,
and everything.
no,
You
no,
talked
don't
about.
go. No,
Hold
don't
on.
go.
Hold on.
No, I'm not going to
Hold
hold on.
on.
I'm not
Because you
going to hold
talked
on.
about.
No, I'm
Hold
not
on.
going to hold on.
Shaq,
I'm
you
sick and
talked
tired
the
of
whole
getting
time.
emails from your fan base
Shaq,
and
you
from
talked the
Jacoby's fan
whole
base
time.
where
Shaq, allow somebody else to speak.
mischaracterize the things that
Shaq,
I've said.
allow
I'm sick and
somebody
tired of
else to
that.
speak.
I
We
acknowledge.
understand
I
your piece,
totally
Shaq. We
acknowledge
really
the
do.
issue with
But
the black
Shaq,
community in
allow
the United
somebody
States.
else to speak at this moment.
Because my question for Bill, and it's actually similar to what we were talking about earlier and everything, because I do have some relatives that have got the land and everything and have gotten the homes, and they don't always take care of the home the way that they should. We've been dealing with this in our family and all along those lines. So, Bill, my question for you is in terms of education, in terms of being richer than a millionaire, is that something that we should also be teaching? Because I think that you can get the land, as you alluded to earlier, all day long, but if you don't know how to keep the land, if you don't know how to upkeep the property or upkeep the home or a number of other things, that is problematic. That is what we run to in our family, and you kind of alluded to it earlier. So can you talk to me about that? Because I think it's important for if you're going to get land, if you're going to get property, that you have an understanding of what that entails. Because like I said, just getting a home, I mean, I can get a home if I had the money today and everything, but I don't know how to do all the plumbing, because you alluded to vocational trades and everything, or all the electrical work and all of that. So I'm going to be perfectly honest. The house would probably be a hot mess if it was up to me and everything in that space. So is it important that we have some education in that lane as well?
Absolutely. Look, if you don't know how to take care of an asset, you're going to screw it up.
Exactly.
I don't care what kind of asset it is. You know, where do we begin? Look, many of you know my background. I took care of my quadriplegic brother for 20 years, and I kept him out of a nursing home. So I would hire healthcare aides from the street, so to speak. And they're very nice people, women, all of them were women, quite frankly. And here's the profile. Some were minority, some were not minority, but it was a wide spectrum. They all had hearts of gold, and they all had little kids. Okay, here's one case in point. This one aide I had, she worked very hard. She would bring her infant daughter with her. Fine. My brother loved it. And I saw this little girl grow up in a single parent household because her dad was in jail for whatever reason. And the boyfriend would also come to pick up the aide from my brother's house. But when she became 12 years old, she became pregnant and delivered a baby. And isn't this wonderful? You talk about a healthcare aide making a low amount of money, having a 12-year-old child with another child, children having children. How do you break that poverty? They're going nowhere. Another case in point, another one of my healthcare aides, the Roman Catholic Church is often the target of, in wills, of, when I die, here's my house, and you figure out what to do with it. And they often give it to somebody like this healthcare aide. And guess what? Within 5 years, she couldn't keep it up. She couldn't pay the taxes, and it went into foreclosure, and she had nothing. And so there was, I don't know, $100,000 plus house. It was a good neighborhood, but it wasn't a great house, but it was a house. And she couldn't even maintain that. What I'm saying is generational poverty occurs. I see that. These cases in point. But if you know how to take care of an asset, whether it be a house or whether it be your portfolio, you can maintain it. It can be done. But without that education, it's going to be dissipated.
This is a place where AI could help people be in everybody's little Jiminy Cricket, where we're finding in a number of areas that the civilization is getting kind of beyond us, getting too complicated for the average person trying to understand stuff. But if we work with our apps, with our phones, keeping up a home is crazy and also subject to inflation. A tree that cost $600 to trim 5 years ago is now $2,400. But doing the tasks involved in keeping up your home, keeping up the rest of your financial sphere, can be helped if we take the advice of the machinery that's turning smarter than we are.
Sasha, it's on you. You definitely had a comment that you want to make.
Mm-hmm. Well, an hour ago, we had a show where the MD, medical doctor, advised us there is a huge shortage of doctors in the United States. And what is it, 180,000 doctors, if I remember correctly. Anyway, so for average person to get reasonable medical care in the United States is impossible. Now, if that's the case, then obviously the people, 70% of the people who cannot put together $1,000, for them getting medical help is impossible, okay? So either you'll die from poverty or from medical problems. It doesn't really matter. It's one way or another. You're practically dead. Now, there is very interesting area. There's in the financial markets, there is very important category which says as ROI, it's return on investment. The best business of all times, where the highest by far return on investment is robbing the banks. Now, from that point of view, if you take American society, where 70% of the people are practically they're insolvent, they're destitute, and they will all go under sooner or later. There is incredible debt, $36 trillion and growing. And to service that debt now takes well more than $1 trillion a year. So for all practical and purposes, America is insolvent, period, unless it will find incredible way to drastically raise the taxes. And when you raise the taxes, are you going for destitute people, 70% who don't have $1,000? No, you're going after 30% who have assets, who have means, who has money. That's where you're going, where the judge asks the accused, so why did you rob the banks? He said, Your Honor, because that's where the money is. So you raise taxes on people who have the money. Now, with the war coming out, and because of the situation in the war, like before, you were scared to raise taxes on rich Americans because they could fly away to some tax haven, maybe to some islands or Europe or so on. It will become impossible once the war will be in. So that's it. Grab everything what you can.
Sasha, you immigrated to Canada.
Let me answer. Let me get my point in real quick. To continue down this pathway, one of the as we keep jumping back because the percentage jump back in about the 10% and the 70%. Bill, is there a way? I mean, one of the things I think that we harp on so much, jumping on that money idea, and the tough part is the way the economy is going and the way that our society is going, education-wise, and so on and so forth. We're losing a lot of the lower end labor force. And we're going to need from social workers to lawn care just all these jobs that are going to go away and that are starting to disappear because as I think Rick, you brought it up about AI, that's going to kill a lot of low-end labor dealing with the automation in building the EVs that are coming, in the auto worker industry, from other factory jobs that are out there to even, they've already killed a lot of jobs in grocery stores. How can we, reevaluate our priorities to a point to not only value money, but not, glorify it to a point that we forget that being a social worker is just as valuable to the system as being a CEO. So,
well, it's not.
In your mind, how Shaq, I'm not talking to you. I'm talking to Bill at this moment. So please. So, Bill, is there a way that that in your mind that you think we could somehow, separate money and values from being synonymous?
Well, when I was at the university dealing with students on a one-on-one basis, and they would ask me for job advice, the question I would pose to them was, why do you think anybody should hire you? And it makes them reflect on what they bring to the table. What are they good at? What do they know how to do? And what should they concentrate on? So it really has to be a self-reflection as to, do I really belong in school? And I can tell you, I know a number of students that did not do well, and they should not have been in school. But you know what? They were in school because their parents told them they had to go to college, and they had to major in this certain way. And they were doing things that are antithetical to what they wanted. And so, but when you pose the student, the question to the student, what is it you want? How are you? Look, very often when I autograph a book, I said, follow your dreams, but don't forget to make a living. Well, we have these dreamers out there who have all these great ideas, but can you support yourself? And they're going to have to come up with that.
At the top of the show, Shaquille asked, why does America feel that it's exceptional? And one major reason is because our news does a terrible job of informing us about a lot of stuff, including telling us about the rest of the world. And like all this economic education that people should have, the news doesn't give us that either. The news does a great job of pissing us off at each other, at the government. Lately, for the past couple of weeks, it's been 24/7, the main mass shooter and Israel. And all day, like you could inform us on Israel in 20 minutes, main mass shooter in 5 minutes, and all these hours of wasted repetition could be used to educate Americans, but we remain pissed off and uneducated because that news likes us that way.
But Rick, you guys can be pissed off as a country. That's fine. It's your country. Be pissed off as much as you like. But to tell people, or to tell each other, or to tell yourselves that you're this horrible racist country, that hasn't been my experience with the United States. But I just want to come back to this point about generational wealth. Is the United States worse today than what it was 20 years ago, or 50 or 100 years ago? Maybe in some ways you think it is. Maybe in other ways you think it's not. Conservatives will say it's worse because the Democrats are trying to trans the kids and they're doing all this woke stuff, right? The left will say it's worse today because the conservatives have these conservative values and they want everyone to go to church. They're doing all this stuff. Look, the bottom line is this. The reason why people have moved to Western countries, but most especially the Five Eyes countries, because they're the New World countries. The reason they've moved there is for a better life. Sasha didn't move to Canada because they thought it was going to be worse than the USSR where he came from. My family didn't move to Australia because they thought it was going to be worse. The family of mine that have moved to the United States, predominantly California, didn't move there because they thought it was going to be worse. But the way the United States is acting and the way that they're talking, it's as though I should say to the family I have left in Fiji, don't go to California. It's a terrible, horrible, racist place that's going to hold you back and destroy you. That's not what the United States is. So whilst the United States absolutely has her flaws, as does Australia, as does the UK and New Zealand and Canada, yes, we all have our flaws. But could we stop beating up on our countries? And for those of us that have immigrated to your countries, we acknowledge things like, for example, I'm not going to be able to completely relate, a little bit, but not completely relate to the slave issue that the United States faces. The black community, especially those that are related to the slaves, you have an issue in the US that has to be dealt with. And it's a blight on US history. It's a blight on US society. But don't tell me that your country is this horrible place. It breaks my heart when I see young college kids burning the American flag as a protest. That shouldn't happen. And if you're going to get wealthy, if you come from a really poor country and you'd like to become wealthy and you'd like to be able to provide your children with a better life, you are not going to find a better country to be able to have the opportunity to provide your children and your grandchildren with a better life than the United States, Canada, the United Kingdom, Australia, New Zealand, and most of Western Europe. So could we stop beating up on those countries and instead talking about great support for those countries who have political ideologies and oppression that none of us would accept if it happened in our own countries?
Because the loudest
countries that we're from.
The loudest voices are the angriest voices in the news and on social media. And so, we need more. It's kind of Pollyanna to say we need more positivity.
I'm extremely outspoken. I'm probably the most outspoken person on this network about how great Western society is, right? I talk about how great America is. I talk about how we should let race be left aside, etc. I talk about how great these countries are. Why am I not that I want to be, but why am I not on Fox or CNN or ABC or NBC? Why are people like me who absolutely adore what has happened in Western culture, what it's meant for my family and for me, why are we not elevated? Why don't we have representation? Because it doesn't fit the narrative that has been put there by media that Western society is horrible. Okay? Jacoby can sit there and laugh because he wants to tell me about how horrible the United States is. Well, go live in Equatorial Guinea and tell me how it is over there. Go to my home country. Go back to Fiji and ask Indians in Fiji how they're going in Fiji versus how they're going in Western countries.
You made your point.
That doesn't get acknowledged.
Shaquille, you made your point.
In media, that doesn't get acknowledged.
Okay, so a few things.
Yes, do tell me how bad America.
And Shaq, go on mute so that you don't interrupt. So we already had a president who literally humped a flag on stage talking about how great the U.S. is. That is something Trump did.
Well, the U.S. is a great
country. Shaq, again, go on mute, please, so you do not interrupt.
You're not going to interrupt as much as I like. I'm afraid of space, right?
Interrupt. Shaq,
I can't that First Amendment over there.
Interrupt. Why are you trying to dominate the conversation and talk over me? Why? You're not going to win that.
I'm not.
Shaq,
I'm not.
Stop. Thank you. So, again, being able to criticize your country is one thing that you have the freedom of doing, especially in the US. And being able to do so, we should do that and understand what those criticisms are and try to improve that. Just because people talk about the institutionalized racism that is still there in this country doesn't mean they hate this country. It means that it's something that needs to be worked on so we can improve. Because the actual term, what we always talk about a more perfect union. So if we're trying to get to that more perfect union, then what we've got to be able to do is look at the flaws that are in the country. Look at the financial issues. I'm not done, Shaq. Please do not interrupt, Shaq. You're not going to end this. We're not going to do this, Shaq. We're not going to do this. So.
Hi, I'm Nathan Osmond, singer, songwriter, motivational speaker, and even mortgage loan officer. I've known Dr. Bill Danko for over 20 years, and we've shared the stage at many great financial conferences the world over. Just recently, Dr. Bill Danko did a great Zoom call for my sales associates and shared some great principles from his New York Times longest best-selling list, The Millionaire Next Door, but also what it means to be richer than a millionaire. This is his new book, and I highly recommend it. The entire team at the Elite Team was very appreciative of Dr. Bill Danko's time and his insights, as he's a speaker that speaks with conviction from the heart. In fact, we ordered over 100 different copies of this book to give to our clients and our associates, because we truly believe that by studying this book, it can really help you to get through these turbulent times. This book is solid with research and survey research and empirical evidence that helps you to understand that yes, money is important, but money plus happiness is even better. I highly recommend that you go get a copy of this book today. You won't regret it.